All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Ostrowski. I am a fifth-year PhD student in organizational behavior at the Tepper School of Business, Carnegie Mellon University. And the paper I'll be presenting today is called What's the Problem? A Qualitative Field Study of How Teams Formulate Open Problems. So organizations are increasingly turning to teams to solve their most vexing problems. But despite that, teams often underperform, even in the presence of having adequate expertise. And what we know is that a problem's definition influences how a team addresses that problem. And a growing body of research is finding support for the notion that how a problem is defined has a substantial impact on how you approach solving it. Sorry, my cat is here. So teams may have difficulty effectively leveraging their members' unique expertise when solving problems, in part because of how they understand or misunderstand those problems. But what are problems? Well, they're gaps between current states and desired or future states. And problems tend to be sorted into two categories of closed problems and open problems. Closed being where when the current and those future states are both known to the solver. And open problems are when current and desired states are unknown to the solver. Now, most problem-solving research is focused on how teams solve closed problems, but open problems are actually more common in most organizational settings. We know a lot about how to solve problems, but much less about how to formulate those problems, which is important because we could end up solving problems that don't actually address the true underlying issue at hand, or that you're actually inequipped to solve. And since open problems are ambiguous in that we don't know exactly what the current state or the future state should be, they have the potential to be defined in the wrong way. But at the same time, they also have the potential to actually be tailored to one's expertise. You can kind of they're malleable, you can move them around. And so the question here is, how do teams balance these two outcomes such that they take on problems that both actually address the underlying, environmental concern, but also that they have the expertise that they can actually solve it? So since the problem is this gap between a current state and a future state, it follows that a team could focus more in their problem formulation on one or the other, either on what is or on what could be. Now, construal level theory holds that focusing on the more proximal thing, which is the current state, lead to concrete thinking and a greater focus on incidental details of ideas. And this could be really beneficial to the team because it might facilitate a shared understanding of one component of the problem, or it could be detrimental in that it could inhibit connections between adjacent ideas if we're thinking in a more concrete manner or focusing on more concrete aspects of ideas. But focusing on the future state, what could be, that could lead to more abstract thinking with a greater focus on the more essential components of ideas. And this could be beneficial too. It might facilitate those connections between ideas at a more abstract level. Or it could be detrimental because it might inhibit a shared understanding, which could lead to representational gaps as members differ in the ways they perceive the problem at hand. So to try to figure out some of these questions and see exactly how focus on a current state versus a future state might affect performance, we went to a place where data could be collected from a context where teams were explicitly tasked with formulating an open problem. And that was a workshop that was aimed at formulating the motivating problem for a multi-million-dollar engineering research center grant proposal. We recorded these meetings and analyzed transcripts, notes, and videos. The manipulation here was basically having teams either focus on the current state by having their primary discussion prompt be, what do we do first? Or focus on the future state by having their primary discussion prompt be, where do we end up? I'll go quickly through these results as I get to the next slide here. You're welcome to pause the video and read them more closely. But basically what we find is that future state focused teams are much more interactive in their discussions. They're much more likely to integrate expertise at any given time, and their final problem statements were perfectly tailored to their expertise. Now, the issue here is that that expertise integration may have come at the expense of evaluating the ideas that they brought forward. Because in the current state focused teams, we see a much less interactive discussion, but we see very detailed evaluation of individual ideas by focusing in depth on single topics at a time. This often came at the expense of knowledge combination, and it resulted in final problem statements that were not perfectly tailored to their expertise. So from this data, we have an emerging framework here where current state focused teams leads to this process of individual cognitive processes affecting team interaction patterns, which then crystallize into social norms, which then loop back into affecting individual cognitive processes. Where current state focused teams take a more diagnostic approach to problem formulation, which leads to a focused conversation with limited knowledge combination and norms that discourage that behavior. The reverse is true for future state focused teams who have a more creative outlook on problem formulation, leading to lots of knowledge combination and norms that support that. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all at in-group. Thanks.